I didn't say a word, not one. And every person in that room, my daughter, her husband, his entire family, they all thought my silence meant I had nothing left. They were wrong. My name is Frank. I'm 53 years old. I work in commercial property management out of Burlington, Ontario, and for the last 28 years, the most important thing in my life has been my family. Not the job. Not the house we eventually paid off on Guelph Line. Not the RRSP I've been feeding since I was 26. My family. My wife, Norma. And our daughter, Avery. Avery was the kind of kid who made parenting look easy. Good grades, good friends, never gave us a real scare. When she was 17, she volunteered every Saturday morning at the food bank on Brant Street, not because a teacher told her to, but because a girl in her class mentioned they were short on help and Avery just showed up. That was her. She showed up for people. So when she called me in the spring of 2021 to say she'd met someone, I was happy for her. She was 31. She'd been focused on her career. She was doing well in urban planning with the region, and I think Norma and I had quietly stopped waiting for the phone call. Then it came. His name was Derek, not from Burlington. He'd grown up in Calgary, moved east for work, landed a project management role with a construction firm in Hamilton. He was 35, good-looking in a way that seemed intentional. He wore the kind of shoes that cost more than they should. The first time he came for dinner, he brought a bottle of wine that he made a point of describing, the region, the vintage, why this particular one. Norma gave me a look across the table that I knew how to read after 29 years of marriage. It wasn't hostility. It was just noted. I told myself I was being unfair. A man brings wine to meet his girlfriend's parents. That's not a crime. He worked hard, clearly. He and Avery seemed happy together, genuinely happy. She laughed differently around him. Looser, I thought. Maybe that was love. Maybe I just didn't know what her adult laugh sounded like. They dated for 2 years. He proposed on a trip to Prince Edward Island, which Avery loved. She'd always wanted to go back since a family trip when she was 8. She called us from the ferry, actually crying, which was not like her, and I sat on the porch steps with the phone against my ear and thought, okay, this is real. She loves this man. That's what matters. I told Norma that night. I said it out loud, like a reminder to myself. That's what matters. The wedding was planned for September 2023, on a property outside of Millgrove, one of those old converted farm venues with string lights in the rafters and long harvest tables. It was exactly what Avery wanted. She'd shown me photos on her phone, sent me links to the venue's Instagram. She was so excited about the light in that barn. That's what she kept saying. The light. We offered to contribute significantly to the cost. It was a destination venue, catering for 160 guests, live band, the full thing. Derek's parents were also contributing. His mother, Constance, and his father, Miles, flew in from Calgary. We met them for the first time at a dinner in Hamilton about 4 months before the wedding. Norma made a real effort. She wore the blouse she saves for occasions. She'd researched a restaurant she thought they'd like. Constance was a tall, narrow woman with very straight posture, and a way of pausing before she responded to things that made you feel like your statement was being evaluated. Miles was quieter. He laughed at everything and said very little. At one point, Constance mentioned, without being asked, that Derek had turned down a promotion to move to Ontario for Avery. She said it once and then moved on, but it sat there on the table with the bread basket. Norma reached over later and put her hand on mine, under the table. On the drive home, I asked her how she felt. She said, "I think Avery is going to need us to be patient." I didn't ask what she meant. I knew. The months between that dinner and the wedding were not easy. I'm going to be honest about that because I think anyone who's planned a child's wedding knows there's a version of this story that pretends it's all joy, and then there's the truth. Derek had opinions about everything, the table arrangements, the menu, the order of speeches. At one point he emailed the venue coordinator directly, bypassing both Avery and us, to change the appetizer selection because he didn't like one of the options. Avery texted me about it, frustrated. I told her to talk to him. She said she had. She said he felt strongly about it. I let it go. There were other things. He didn't include my brother and his wife in the seating chart in a way that made sense. They were put at the back with people they didn't know, which I noticed and mentioned to Avery. She fixed it, but I had to mention it. There was a weekend in August where they came to Burlington for a barbecue, and Derek spent most of the afternoon on his phone, inside, while Avery helped Norma with the salads and laughed in the kitchen. I watched that through the window and I thought, this is the imbalance. That's what I'm looking at. But I said nothing. Because she was happy, or close enough to happy that I didn't have the right to reach in and pull at the thread. The day of the wedding was September 9th, warm for fall. That light Avery had talked about, the late afternoon light through the barn windows. It was exactly what she'd described. She was beautiful. I'm not a man who uses that word loosely, but standing at the back of that barn, watching her walk up the aisle toward Derek, I had to press my mouth together. Norma cried immediately. She was done the second the doors opened. The ceremony was lovely. I'll give them that. The reception started at 6, dinner by 7, and by 9 o'clock the thing that broke our family happened. Avery and Derek had gone to the head table after their first dance, and Norma and I were still at the family table, finishing the last of the main course. The band was playing, people were moving around, and then Constance came to the table. I don't know exactly what she said to Norma first. I had turned to say something to my brother beside me, but I heard the shift in Norma's voice, the slight tightening, and I turned back around. Constance was standing very close to Norma. She was smiling, but it wasn't a warm smile, and she said in a voice that was controlled but entirely audible over the music, "You've made this more complicated than it needed to be. We all know that. I think it would be better if you and your husband found somewhere else to be for the rest of the evening." Norma went completely still. I stood up. "I'm sorry," I said. Constance looked at me with that same evaluating pause. "The tension between our families tonight has been noticeable. I'm asking you, for the sake of the children, to step back. There's a lobby area. You're welcome to wait there. We're Avery's parents," I said. "I'm aware," she said. And then Miles appeared at her shoulder, not saying anything, just standing there. And I realized this had been planned. This wasn't a moment of impulse. This was a decision they had made together before they walked over. I looked at Norma. She had her hands flat on the table. Her face was completely composed, and I knew her well enough. Composure was the last thing she had left to hold on to. I reached down, picked up her hand, and I said quietly, "Let's get some air." I did not look at Constance again. I did not say another word. We walked out of the barn. We stood outside in the parking lot for a few minutes. It was cooler out there. The music from the barn was muffled. Norma didn't cry. She stood with her arms around herself and looked at the field across the road, and I stood beside her, and for a long time neither of us spoke. Then she said, "Did Derek know?" I said I didn't know. She said he knew. I had no answer for that. We did not go back into the reception. We called a car. We said goodbye to no one because there was no one nearby to say goodbye to. I texted Avery from the back seat. I said we'd left early, that we loved her, that we'd talk soon. She replied at 12:47 a.m. "Okay, Dad," 2 words. I stared at them for a long time before I put the phone down. The drive back to Burlington took 40 minutes. Norma sat with her head against the window, and I looked at the highway and thought about what a man is supposed to do in that moment. What action is available to him? Because there's a version of me, not a version I'm proud of, but a real one, that wanted to turn that car around, that wanted to walk back into that barn and say things I cannot unsay in front of 160 people. But that version doesn't serve Norma. It doesn't serve Avery, and it hands Derek and Constance exactly what they want. A scene, a story, a reason to say the problem was always us. So I drove home. I helped Norma out of the car. I made her tea she didn't drink. I sat across from her at the kitchen table we've had since Avery was in elementary school, and I said, "I'm not finished. I just need to think." She looked at me. "Okay," she said. Avery called the following Tuesday. I let Norma answer. I sat at the kitchen table and listened to one side of a conversation that took 40 minutes. There was a lot of silence from Norma's end. At one point she said, very flatly, "Avery, your mother-in-law told me to go wait in the lobby." And there was a longer silence after that. When Norma came back to the table, she said Avery had cried. She said Avery claimed she didn't know it was going to happen. She said Derek was mortified. I said, "What does mortified look like for Derek?" Norma said, "Apparently an email. He sent us an email, not a phone call, an email. 2 paragraphs, formal, that expressed regret for the disruption to the evening, and noted that his mother could sometimes be direct in ways that land poorly. He hoped we could move forward. I read it 3 times. The phrase "land poorly" stayed with me. Like what happened to Norma in that barn was a matter of delivery, a miscommunication, a social misstep at a company function. I didn't respond to the email. I want to tell you what the weeks after that were like. Because I think people imagine that the hurt from something like this fades quickly if the official apologies get delivered. It doesn't work that way. Norma started sleeping badly. She'd wake up at 3 in the morning, and I'd find her in the kitchen reading, or just sitting. She didn't want to talk about the wedding when friends asked. She started making excuses not to attend family things that might include Derek's family. Our next door neighbor, a woman named Pam who'd known Norma for 15 years, asked how the wedding went, and Norma said, "Beautiful," and changed the subject, and when she came inside, she sat down on the stairs and just held her own elbows, Avery called every week. She was trying. I'll say that. She was clearly caught, clearly stressed, and she kept trying to build small bridges, sending photos, inviting us for dinner, texting Norma about things unrelated to any of it. I participated in those calls. I was present. I asked about her work. I laughed at appropriate moments. I did not bring up the barn or the parking lot or the email, but I was not finished. Here's what I knew about Derek that most people didn't. His firm, the Hamilton-based construction company he worked for, had recently been awarded a significant contract through a region of Halton Infrastructure Initiative. A real opportunity, the kind of thing that gets written up in the Hamilton Spectator and passed around at industry lunches. And here's the thing about the region of Halton. I've spent 28 years in commercial property management in this area. I know people, not in a corrupt way. I want to be clear about that. I know people the way anyone does when they've been honest and reliable in the same industry, in the same geography for nearly 3 decades. You accumulate relationships, you show up on time, you return calls. People remember that. One of those people was a senior contact I had through the Ontario Building Officials Association, a man who'd sat on review committees for regional contracts. We'd known each other for 11 years. We'd had lunch, maybe a dozen times, helped each other out with referrals, attended the same conferences. I called him. I didn't ask for anything improper. I want to be very clear about that. I called him because I'd heard, through the normal channels of my industry, that there were questions being raised about the awarded firm's project history, specifically about a job they'd done in Brantford 3 years prior that had come in significantly over budget and behind schedule. I had seen the name of Derek's firm in that regional report. I called my contact and I said, "I just want to make sure someone is taking a proper look." He said that was a fair thing to raise. That's all I did. I made one phone call and said that was a fair thing to raise. The review took 6 weeks. I don't know everything that happened inside it, and I'm not going to pretend I do. What I know is what Avery told me on a Sunday afternoon in February, when she came to the house alone, without Derek, for the first time since the wedding. She sat at our kitchen table, the same table where her mother had sat across from me in the dark 3 months earlier, and she told us the contract had been suspended pending review, and that Derek's firm was under scrutiny, and that Derek was under a lot of pressure. She wasn't telling us to blame us. She was telling us because we were her parents, and she was scared. Norma got up and made her tea, real tea this time. She put it in front of Avery and sat beside her and put an arm around her daughter, and I watched them from across the table and I thought about the phone call. I didn't mention it. I don't know if I ever will. What happened between February and now has been slow. Things that matter usually are. Derek's firm came through the review with some conditions, changes to their reporting processes, a new oversight requirement on regional work. Not catastrophic, but not nothing either. Derek's position within the company got quieter, less visible. He stopped mentioning the Hamilton contract at family dinners, which he used to do often. Constance and Miles have not been to Burlington. Avery and Derek are still together. I don't know what their marriage looks like from the inside. I know what I see from the outside. She still laughs in our kitchen when she's here. And Derek has shaken my hand at the door now, properly, not the half-hearted version, twice. Whether that means something, I honestly can't say. What I can say is that Norma slept through the night for the first time in months about 3 weeks after Avery's February visit. I woke up at 4 a.m. and realized she wasn't in the kitchen. She was right there asleep. I lay there in the dark for a while just listening to her breathe, and that felt like enough. I don't need Derek to understand what I did, or why. I don't need Constance to apologize, though I think part of Norma still waits for it, and I understand that. I don't need anyone to know about the phone call. What I needed was for Norma to stop waking up alone in a dark kitchen, holding her own elbows. She has. That's the whole story.